All right, it's another episode of the RSL Random Fan Podcast. I'm a host, Brant Goebel, and I'm joined by Tyler Thomas, as usual, as well as Brennan. But we have a special guest tonight, Mark Jensen. Mark Jensen, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And people are probably wondering, why? Who is this guy, right?
Who is this Mark Jensen?
And between the two of all four of us, we have 2 Emmys, and I think most of those are yours, though, right, Mark?
Well, it's never too late,
Never
you guys,
too late.
You guys are in the hunt.
Yeah, I was trying to work in how we don't have Emmys, but Tyler mentioned lame intros, and that's what I'm good for. So, Mark, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
I met your wife. That's how we kind of connected. I'd met her for a couple years, and she saw me wandering around yarn shows and Fiber Fest talking about soccer, and never mentioned that her husband was this incredible Emmy award-winning soccer fan or so, related to, involved with, probably the most famous soccer show at the moment, Welcome to Wrexham. So what do you do on that show, and how did you get into that, Mark?
So my official title is a re-recording mixer. And the first time I heard that term, I thought, wow, is that really what we're called? Re-recording mixers? That's such a ungainly mouthful of words, and it's already confusing with the re together. I prefer post-audio mixer. And
much more elegant.
Yeah, so
like a DJ.
Yeah, and it already puts the word audio in there, which already kind of clues people in, to what we do. The post is kind of the most important word in the production world. You have pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is your casting, and you're writing your script, and your location scouting, and then production is the cameras are rolling, the lights are on, and then post-production is everything's in the can, and now we got to go edit it. And once it's edited, we have to finish it. And so me and a couple other positions are what's called finishing. So we're called finishers. And so I do the finishing for the audio, and there's another person who does finishing for color. They're called a colorist. And then there's another person who does online, and they kind of wrangle all of the various video elements together with graphic effects and subtitles and all the things that you see kind of on screen that you never think, who does that? That guy does it, or girl. And so the 3 of us kind of make up the finishing team. And I've been doing this for about 25 years now. And my involvement with Welcome to Wrexham, I did a show many years ago. This is probably 10 years ago, called the Pecos League. It was I think it was on Fox Sports, and it was a series about the lowest level of professional baseball here in the United States. So there's a thing called the Pecos League, and I think it's actually kind of in your area. I think it's kind of in Utah and Nevada and I don't know, that kind of area. And the guy that I worked on it with was a guy named John Henyon. He was the showrunner. And we just hit it off, had a great connection. We then, kind of during the pandemic, we did a show that's on Netflix right now called Playbook. It's kind of about sports coaches. We also did another series on professional bull riding called Fearless that's also on Netflix that is excellent. And during the Playbook thing, this was, like I said, during the pandemic, that show was nominated for an Emmy, but we did not win. And he kind of called me in the middle, towards the end of the day, and he said, "Actually, I'm in Wales right now, and I'm filming this kind of crazy soccer show that you'll see in a little bit." And I was like, "Okay." And so then we got the show kind of I don't know. This is obviously during season 1. This is 2-3 years ago, and I was like, "Oh, Ryan Reynolds is in this thing, and oh, Rob McElhenney is in this thing." I had no idea, and then we went through that first season, and we really didn't know kind of what to do with the show. We were like, "What is the show?" And how should we approach it? Like, how should we think about it in terms of audio? There was obvious things like when we covered the games, it was like, oh, we need to have a cheer when they score, and we need to have, have ball kicks and various soccer sounds. Soccer is not a sport that has a lot of sound necessarily to it, but we were trying to figure out like how do we kind of characterize this show to kind of have a specific sound and a kind of a tone to it, And after that first season, an interesting thing happened, which was, I think because of Ryan Reynolds, I think there was just eyeballs on it a little bit. It probably stood out a little bit more than it would just because of the star power that he kind of has. But the weird thing that happened was both my hipster friends were like, dude, Wrexham, cool show, And then my mom was like, I love Welcome to Wrexham. What a great show. And I was like, wow, like those Venn diagrams never overlap usually, right? Like that's really rare that like both my mom and like my like super cool Hollywood friends are like,
same show, right?
Yeah, and I was like, wow. And oddly enough, I've had like another friend of mine, he kind of found out that I worked on it, and he was like, I just got to tell you that like there's really no other show on the air like this. It's just such a feel-good show. Like all the other shows, it's screaming housewives and people barking at each other and stuff. We watch that show and we just come after it's done and we just feel good, and it's a feel-good show. And I was like, yeah, like it is. They managed to kind of take the town and it's kind of like hard scrabble story and just kind of like make that relatable to everybody, and then also kind of wrap it around the game of soccer. And I it was funny that particular first season, John, because they're playing to get out of the league, they're in the playoffs, right? And he was like, please let them win this game so that we have like a cool episode that we can like end the season on. Hey, they won and we're going to get promoted and we're moving up, right? And spoiler alert here, they do not win that game.
Nope, not season 1, right?
And so John was like, but this is the brilliant element of like the editors that worked on that show, is they were able to still tell a really compelling story of losing, of loss, of being able to take it on the chin and fold your jersey up for the, put it away for the season and dust yourself off, get yourself back up and get up back on your horse. And that episode, I had people come, into my studio, and without even knowing that I worked on the show, they were like, have you seen the last episode of Wrexham? And I was like,
really?
And they were like, it is the best hour of television I've ever seen. And I was like, I worked on that show, right? And they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's my show. And they were like, yeah. And seriously, I was like, this is the first time that I was like, wow, like, that's amazing that you didn't even know I worked on the show, and you are like telling me how awesome the show is. That was just like, and that's the thing that happens. Like sometimes when you work on a show, you're just kind of too close to it. You don't know what it is until it's out there and it's just kind of resonating. And that was the first time that I was like, this show is actually pretty cool. Like this is pretty amazing. And so it got nominated for an Emmy, and this was my third nomination, and I just was kind of, at this point, like, used to losing. Like, I don't know. I was just kind of like...
It's an honor to be nominated.
It's an honor to be nominated. I was like, look, I get to go to the Emmys. I mean, that alone is like,
that's
you
cool.
put on a tux, and it's this whole event, and you're there with, you're like, oh my God, I think that's Stephen Colbert, and, you can't even believe, like, you're here, right? You're like, me? I'm here? Like, what? And then that particular night, we were nominated for 6 categories, and the first category comes up, and like the Emmys is a weird event because for the most part you're sitting there like bored out of your mind a little bit because they're like, the award for best makeup goes to, and you're like, I don't care really who wins.
Yeah, let's move on here.
But yeah, and see, this is a 2.5 hour event, so it's like after best makeup, it's like best stage lighting, and you're like looking at your phone and then they're like, the categories for best cinematography are blah 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 blah. Welcome to Wrexham, and you're like, oh my God, and suddenly your heart is going like 400 miles an hour, and you're like, what's going to happen, And we won. We won for whatever that first category was. It was like best cinematography, and we won. And it was just like, we're screaming ourselves hoarse,
great.
the cinematographers go up there. They're like, "Whoa, we won!" Like, did you look at the other shows? They're pretty cool shows, And so and then like the next thing, I forget what it was, like best editing, and then it was like the best overall show, and then it was best directing, and it was just win after win after win after win. And then our category for best outstanding sound mixing was like right at the end of the show almost. And so they here it comes, and I'm up against like The Voice, and I'm up against Amazing Race, and I'm up against a bunch of other shows, and I was just like, there's just no way. There's just no way I'm gonna win, And then they said welcome to Wrexham, and I could not believe it. And as I was walking down, John Hanyon, who's the guy who brought me onto the show, he stood up and was in the aisle, and I gave him a massive hug, and I was just the emotion of it it's overwhelming, And you get up there, and now you're sitting in there in front of 3,000 people, half of which are like famous people. You're like, I recognize like everybody sitting in the front row, and then you gotta they give you 30 seconds to talk, and then after you 30 seconds, they start up the music and the lights kind of dim, and you're like, oh, and you just don't remember any of it. It is all a blur. Your face is numb. You think you're gonna pass out, and then like they hand you the statue, and you go backstage, and then you do this whole like press junket thing, and yeah, so we won, and just amazing, and then after season 1. I wasn't sure, like, okay, we're on kind of hiatus or filming season 2, and I reached out to the guy who is like the production guy that I talked to, and I was like, after season 1, there was this thing that I noticed that happened, which was like the sound of the show. It has everything to do with the crowd, like the crowd, the people that show up there at the stadium. They've got all these songs they sing, and they've got all these chants and everything, and like we had no idea that was like such an integral part of like soccer, and so we were like, we gotta like record these guys, right? Like let's do that. And so for season 2, the sound guy, and usually when I make that request, like, hey, can we record this thing? And I was like, can we please be in stereo, like 2 microphones pointing at the crowd, because a lot of times the audio that you'll get back, it's like mono, and it's from a mile away, and it's just hard to work with, and it doesn't sound great.
So you're saying 2 microphones?
2 microphones
makes it clearer and
that's
easy to hear?
It's stereo. Stereo is 2 mics. Well, this guy, whoever their sound guy is, he actually went out there and he rigged up microphones all around the audience, so it was 4 microphones, so it's quadraphonic. Nice. And you can see these speakers in the back behind me, right? So there's actually speakers in front of me. You kind of can't see those right now, but so when we mix the show, we take that sound, and I'm going to play some of it for you right now. Oh, I'm going to try to. Hang on. Right, so that's the Wrexham chant, right? That's in quadraphonic, and so and we pump that in loud. And all of the stuff that we put in there, the cheers and all the different songs that they sing, We've Got Mullen, Super Paul Mullen, all that stuff. We have, I think, at this point, almost 24 hours of recording from the stadium. And it's all just flagged and binned out so that, like, anytime it's like, oh, we know, I hear that song that they're singing. And now, of course, I know all their songs, right? So I can kind of drag all that stuff in there and stuff. And that was a massive sea change between season 1 and season 2. Season 2 became just like the games were like super exciting, and just the crowd, the roar of the crowd and stuff in there.
It felt like you were sitting there. Like watching the second season, it felt like you were literally sitting there experiencing what everybody experiences over there.
Yeah, that's
you
the
guys
goal.
did a phenomenal job.
That's the goal.
Do you have a sports background? Is this new to you, or what's your sports background?
I played a little bit of soccer growing up. AYSO here in California, and then I became kind of like kind of a skater punk guy, and was like, I don't play sports and whatever. And then when I was in my like 20s, a group of friends of mine was like, hey, you should come out and play roller hockey with us. And I was like, really? Like, and I went and just did it once, and it was the funnest thing I've ever done.
What year was this?
Probably like or late 90s, I want to say.
So
That was
after
like the
Xanadu.
rollerblade trend, like the real heavy
Yeah.
brink and stuff.
Yeah, and I still to this day play roller hockey. Before that, like my exercise routine was like, I gotta go run, I gotta do some sort of like cardio
Boring.
thing. Yeah, hated
Yeah.
doing it. Now it was like I could not wait. I ended up joining a bunch of leagues. I was playing like every night. It's just like addicted to it. So that's my sport. That's what I'm into. But oddly enough, like I've been around enough sports, and even been to when Wrexham came to LA. I went to that game, and you sit there and you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of what the murmur sounds like here. Let's remember that and stuff. I actually, when I went to that game, I noticed that right behind the goal, there seemed to be kind of a lot of red shirts, kind of a little like mass of like Wrexham fans. And I thought, I'm going to go down there, and I'm going to, because I know all the songs that they sing, and I was like, let's go down there and sing some songs. That sounds fun.
And that was down at Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego?
No, it was, it's where the LA Galaxy play. It's kind of in Carson here. Yeah. That's the team they were playing, was the LA Galaxy. And for whatever reason, I think there's just got to be like this critical mass of like fans before they start singing, because nobody was doing any singing. And I was like listening around, and I was like, these people have like Welsh accents, but like nobody wanted to sing. And I would kind of get it going like, Ali, Ali, Ali. It's kind of started a little bit, and they weren't gonna do it.
Maybe it was the older folks and not the younger folks.
I think also like there's the guy that shows up with the drum, and he kind of like gets it going a little bit, and like I think there's just got to be enough people there to kind of make it happen. So the whole song thing is completely fascinating, because every year like the songs are different, and they change and they morph, and like I'm like, who's like coming up with these? How does everybody know the lyrics to this song now? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like complete, like somebody should study this phenomenon, like how soccer songs get generated and become popular, and how they kind of pick weird songs from like, this was a hit in the 80s, but we're going to take this song and completely rework the lyrics to be a song about our goalie or whatever,
did you hear the story about the White Stripes song, the whoa, how that became like a soccer phenomenon song?
No.
Fascinating. It's really a cool story behind that one too. But same idea, right? All of a sudden somebody starts doing it, then the whole stadium does it, and it's like, what is happening?
There's got to be somebody that's like, oh, I'm gonna write the lyrics to this, and then like post it somewhere or text it to the group chat or so. I don't know. Like, how do they all know what to sing? It's like crazy.
So backing up a little bit, how did you find this vocation? Did you go to like a job fair at school, and you're like, hey, come on over to the sound mixing, jump on in here? How do you end up
sound mixing booth?
Getting into something that wins you through your talents a couple of Emmys?
So believe it or not, I have a degree in psychology.
I would have. That's
right.
exactly
Okay.
where I would have started.
Left turn.
Right. This is the power. This is what I always tell like kids that are kind of like in high school and stuff. It's like, look, man, like there's what you can learn out there and have people teach you, and there's what you can teach yourself. And those are two vastly different things. So I was a musician when I was like in 4th grade. I went to like a school, auditorium thing, and they had like a high school band playing there, and I saw somebody playing a saxophone, and I was just like, what is that? Wow, and I told my parents, like, I saw this thing and it was like golden and it had all these keys on it, and so they rented me a sax, and I learned how to play the sax. I was in school band up until about like sophomore year, right about that time when school band was like, oh, that's uncool. School band, not cool. And so then I was like, okay, and this is kind of like mid 80s, and I was kind of like into punk rock, and so I was like, well, I'm going to buy a guitar. So I got a guitar, and I kind of like figured out how to play that thing. And then I was a musician. I was like, you know, I had I kind of noticed that there was like 3 or 4 other guys that seemed to kind of be into punk rock at my school, and I was like, you guys like this kind of music? I see all this like stuff written on your peachy folder here, you know, Addicts and Bad Religion and whatever, and they're like, yeah, you know, and they ended up being in a band, the 3 of them, and I was like, oh, cool. I was like, do you guys mind if I come over? They're like, yeah, we do mind. Please do not come over. And I was like, great, I'll be over. I'll be over 3 with my amp and my guitar. And they were like, no, please don't. And I was like, I'm coming over. There's nothing you can do to stop me.
I love it.
And so I just kind of wedged my way into this like band. I became the 3rd guitar player, you know, because anyway. And
the
so
Clash? Is that the band?
Oh no, this is just a bunch of like weirdos hanging out in La Habra Heights, California. So just kind of played, you know, and this is kind of right about the time that like home recording equipment is becoming affordable, you know, because up to that time you could buy semi-professional recording stuff, but it was like thousands of dollars to get like a mixing desk and the tape recorder and all the cables, and each tape was like $25 for like a 20-minute reel of reel, you know, tape and stuff. And when I was in high school, there was another like band that was a little bit older than us, and they were kind of also a punk rock band. And one day we were hanging out in the parking lot, and they were like, "Hey man, you want to hear our tape?" And I was like, "What?" And they put like the tape into the car cassette thing and played it, and we were like, how did you record your own music? Like, that's... And it sounded great, too. And we were like, what? And so we ended up we were like, what studio did you go to? And so we ended up going to the studio. And, you know, the first time you're in a studio, you have no idea what's going on. The guys are just telling you, do this, do that, go over here. We're just playing our songs, whatever. We get the tape, and we're like, this sounds terrible. Like, what? Like, how did you guys get such a great recording when ours is awful, you know? And so... And by the way, all that process cost us $500, like all the money we had saved over months, you know. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, okay, there's got to be like a better way to do this. And so we would go down to our local music store, and we were like, what's this thing right here with the tape cassette thing in it? And they're like, well, it's a 4-track recorder. You can just take a cassette that you buy at Rite Aid or Thrifties at the time, and you just pop it in there, and it records on 4 tracks on this little crappy tape, right? And we were like, oh, and how much is this little box? And they were like, $400. And they're like, we can afford that, you know? And so we bought the 4-track recorder, and we were like, oh, we're going to have this thing mastered in no time. This is going to be, you know, breeze. And then like 2 years later, we're still struggling to get a good sound on this box, you know? And, you know, then we would ask, like, why do our recordings still not sound like what we're hearing on the radio? And they're like, well, fidelity. You don't, you know, tape fidelity, like recording equipment fidelity. You need better equipment. And we were like, okay, here we go again. And so it was another investment into the next step up of equipment. But all along, like, unbeknownst to myself, I'm teaching myself the art of recording, right? Microphones, tape level, compression, EQ, all of this stuff that goes into trying to get your music to sound good. These are the skills that I use every day today, right? And so I got to the point where we were making pretty good sounding music, you know. It like the music itself sounded good. The music itself was not good. I should just throw that out there.
But the quality of the sound was great.
The quality of the sound was good. The songwriting and the songcraft was awful. Yeah. So, you know, it turns out it's actually pretty hard to do it all yourself.
Right.
And so I ended up, I was working at a music store, and one of the guys that came in there, he was a drummer, but he also owned his own studio. And he would kind of run this ad in the back of these like musician magazines. And it was like the 4 4s. It was like $400 for 4 songs and 400 cassettes and, you know, that kind of like, you know, $9.99 pizza deal kind of thing, but for recording. And he would get kids driving from literally that western half of the United States down to La Habra, California, the middle of nowhere, to record in his little cinder block studio for $400 and get their 4 songs and 400 cassettes. And he was doing it all himself. He would run the sessions, and then he would spend the whole evening like mastering it, and then running the cassette machine tape, cranking out the stuff and doing the printing on the cassettes, and by midnight he was, here's your tapes, get the hell out of here. And then the next morning he would start over with a new band driving in with their van and unloading their drums.
Oh, wow.
And he was just like toast. And so he was like, Mark, I need help, And so I was like, well, I know how to record, I can come down and do that. And so he was like, please come down and do that. And so I went down there, and all these kids coming in, they all wanted to sound like Green Day. That was literally all their songs were like Green Day, and that's all they wanted to be. And I was like, okay, well, I grew up listening to punk rock, like I know what to do, right? And so I would kind of direct them a little bit. Like they would come in, and I'd be like, well, look, you've got a good amp here. Why are you using this crappy distortion pedal? Like just plug your guitar straight into the amp and overdrive your amp, and we're going to double track your guitar tracks, and let's tune your drums. Let's make sure we're all in tune, And I would kind of just produce them, and by 5 o'clock that day, we had 4 songs that sounded like Green Day. Like it was pretty banging, And the kids were like, oh my God, you are so much better than the other guy that works here, because they had all been there like a bunch of times before, right? And I was like, really? Like they're like, oh yeah, like this tape sounds amazing, And it was the first job that I had ever had where at the end of the day I was like, this feels like rewarding. This feels like, this is like, I actually enjoy doing this. Like who would have thought like a job could be rewarding and fun, and and so at that time I mentioned that I lived in Seattle, so I moved to Seattle, and I was just like, I went up there with my head this big, like I'm gonna record the next Soundgarden record, look out, here I come. And I get up there and I find out that actually, because the Seattle scene had blown up, and Nirvana, Pearl Jam, blah blah blah, but none of those bands recorded in Seattle. They all went down to LA to do their recordings. And so I'm up there like, I'm ready to whatever. And there was one studio that actually Soundgarden recorded at, and there was a waiting list to be an unpaid intern. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And
so I was like, well, I don't know. I'm just going to like look at the phone book, and I'm going to see if there's any other recording studios. In the Seattle phone book, the section for recording was like half a page. And so I just took my resume, I put on a suit, and I took my resume around, and I walked into these places, and I literally just handed everybody my resume. And it didn't matter, like with some guys I was like knocking on their door, and they showed up in their pajamas. I was like, here's my resume, hello, and they were like, what? We're a DJ company that records like wedding videos and stuff. And I was like, you're in the phone book under recording, so here's my resume. And so a little pretentious. But one of the places that I walked into was a place that did recording for all of the Northwest's advertising for radio and TV. And so I walk into this place, and it's really nice, really like the nicest studio I've ever walked into. Everyone's kind of walking around in like suits and ties, and I'm like, wow, like who's that? And they're like, oh, that's like the CEO of like McDonald's like advertising agency. And I was like, oh, wow. And I met the owner, and she was an interesting person, but we kind of got along, and she ended up hiring me to work in the dub room, which is like, that's like it's like the mail room kind of version of like
that's
any
beginning.
kind of like, yeah, this is where you start, right? I was the assistant dub room guy. So our job was like, in all the studios, they were recording, spots and radio spots and TV spots, and then we would like dub them, make copies of them, and we would do radio traffic. So this is back before the internet, so you would have to actually like dub things onto reel-to-reel tapes and then mail those out to the radio station so they could play their Taco Bell spot or whatever it was, And just kind of as a joke, because I was living up there, I had no friends really, because I just moved up there, and I was like, so I'd come in on the weekends, and I would take like the Taco Bell spot that they had recorded, and I would be like, I'm gonna like joke around, and I would like put a bunch of like death metal underneath it, like, it's the Taco Bell, it's the death metal Taco Bell spot, And then I would like play that for the engineers the following day, like, "Hey man, did you see what I did to your Taco Bell spot?" And they'd be like, "Ha ha, Mark, it's great, you're very funny." But what it unwittingly did was they were like, "Hey, Mark actually knows how to use his equipment, and he knows how to mix because he showed me that death metal Taco Bell spot that he did, and he knows what he's doing." And so when people were sick or they were on vacation or whatever, like I ended up being like kind of like the fill-in guy, and so right at I worked at this place for like 4 months, and there was this big sort of like tumultuous thing that happened in the studio. The guy who was like the guy to record your Taco Bell spot in Seattle, like if you wanted like the best sound, the guy's name was Jason. And so this is what attracted everyone to this one studio was Jason. Oh, you got to have Jason like do your spot, And he was leaving. And so there was like a week where he kind of didn't show up, and we were all like, "Where's Jason? Like, what's going on?" And then he came in and he kind of told the owners like, "Hey, I'm leaving and I'm going to go start my own place and I'm out of here." And they were like, "What? Our business is going to completely crater." And so like there was just like, I'm telling you, like the place was like a funeral hall for like days. It was just like weird, a lot of closed doors, a lot of screaming. I was like, wow, like this is a lot of drama at this place, And as on his last day, as he was walking out, he goes, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I was like,
"Does it pay?"
Yeah. And I was like, he's like, this the studio that I'm going to, that I'm starting, I'm going to need like somebody that does like your job, dub room person. And I was like, "You are the guy in Seattle. Like, if I don't leave with you, there's not going to be a job here next week, like, I'm sure." So I ended up going with him, and I worked with him for 2 years, and he kind of mentored me. And he just kind of pushed me into the deep end. He was like, "Look, you're either going to figure this out, you're either going to sink or swim here." And so he would do this thing where he would reach out to like filmmakers who had shot like a short film or something, 10, 12, 15-minute kind of thing. And he would just tell him, "Hey, you know what? I've got a guy that's like kind of learning how to do this stuff. We want to do your whole film project for free." And then he would have me do it at night. So I would work my normal day shift, and then like the filmmaker would come at like 6 p.m. and be like, "Okay, let's work on my film." And they had shot this thing, what they call MOS, which is without sound. It's a German term, meaning they had a 16 millimeter camera, and they had gone around, and a 16 millimeter camera, it makes a tremendous amount of noise when it's, rolling. And so they had shot all their stuff, and they had no sound. And so they had kind of cobbled together this film, but they had no audio at all. And then it was my job to like, okay, this car drives by, we got to find the sound of a car driving by, and just like build the thing up. And it just took months and months and months. But like, that was like how I kind of cut my teeth, was like learning how to use the equipment and learning how to like work with the client and learning how to craft sound. And some of these things actually ended up playing at the Seattle International Film Festival. And I ended up kind of working a little bit with some other like clients that, maybe couldn't afford like to hire Jason, but he still wanted to do their work or whatever. And so when I moved back down to LA, I kind of came down here thinking like, I again head this big, I can do anything. I'm a sound god now, And I kind of went around to all the different studios, and the piece of equipment that I learned on up there was this thing called an AMS audiophile, which nobody was using down here in LA. Everybody down here uses a thing called Pro Tools. You've maybe heard of that, editing software for audio. And so they were like, "Well, how are you on Pro Tools?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm great. Yeah, great at Pro Tools." And they're like, "Okay, well, sit down and show me how to like create a fade." And I was like, going up to the menu, and I was like, fade. Where's a fade?" And they're like, "Bro, get out of here. You don't know what you're doing on Pro Tools." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't know."
Busted.
Yeah, busted. And so I ended up, one guy, I kind of pulled the wool over his eyes, and I was like, and then by that time I kind of figured out where fade was in the menu, and I was like, oh, there's actually a quick key for it, like Apple F, And so I ended up getting kind of like an audition to to like mix at this one place, and they gave me like this 3-minute segment, and they're like, mix this 3-minute segment. And let me tell you, man, I worked on this thing for like 6 hours. Nowadays, a 3-minute segment would take me like 15 minutes. This thing was perfect. Because this was my audition, right? So I mean, I'm telling you, like, I just like every little thing was just like perfect. So I played it for him, and he was like, okay, you know how to mix, you know. And so they gave me the show. It was this Lifetime show. It was like this kind of like, this was right when Martha Stewart was big, so it was a Martha Stewart knockoff show for Lifetime. And I was like, okay, you know, sure. And so literally I ended up like, you know, oh, now I have a half-hour show I've got to mix in a day. And I'm like, oh, like, you know, sweating it, you know, and you know, the anxiety is like real, you know. And I would, you know, I ended up mixing it, and I was like, okay, I think I got it sounding good. And then like there would be like one thing where I didn't know how to do, like one step, and I was like, God, I gotta actually go and call somebody and be like, how do you do this one thing? And they're like, bro, it's this thing right here, you just push that. And then, you know, I was like, oh yeah, I knew that, yeah, okay. So, you know, I kind of just faked it, you know, the fake it till you make it thing. And you know, I would watch the show on air, and I'd be like, okay, that was a mistake, don't do that again, you know. But luckily, you know, kind of nobody noticed my f-ups, you know, and they were like,
Lifetime.
Yeah, it's yeah, you know, it's you know, you're you know. And then just kind of like, you know, by the time I was there for like 3 months, I was like starting to kind of walk through the halls like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get fired today, you know. Because prior to that, every day I was like, today's the day someone is like, you're an imposter, you have no idea how to use Pro Tools, and you have no idea how to do a layback, and you know. And so, yeah, and oddly enough, I ended up working for that particular company for 20 years. So, I stayed there, and that's the story. That's how I am, who I am, and where I am. And then about 5 years ago, I just kind of went off on my own, and so I'm just kind of a freelance mixer. And in LA, luckily, there's enough work where that's a job that you can have. That's a thing that you can be. It's weird. It's weird. Like, there's not a lot of people that do what I do here in LA. A lot of people work for studios. They're not. Mm-hmm. I mean, technically, I don't have a job. It's a weird thing to say, but I don't. You know, my job is always like the next email. It's always the next phone call. It's always the next thing. It's a bizarre. I don't know. I am not a person who really has the mental or like fortitude to be able to handle that. Like I shouldn't be able to handle that. You know, like if it ever really dawns on me that I don't have a job, like I'm going to freak out. You know, because I don't know. You know.
Well, I did a little research, and I noticed. You worked on MasterChef USA, right?
Yeah, I still do. Yeah.
Okay, and I thought of Gordon Ramsay.
Right.
Right. Have you met him or anything?
I came close to meeting him. I went to the set where they film, and you know, it's a very busy day for everybody there. There's like 200 people on set, and my job was I was just going to stay out of the way, you know, and I was just there to kind of like I'm friends with the guy who does the records the audio for the show, and I just wanted to come down and kind of see what they do and see their equipment and just, you know, kind of see it. And that day, the executive producer was like, I'm going to get you to meet Gordon, you know, but then she got busy and then it didn't happen. So it didn't happen, but Gordon's a great guy. You know, everybody on set loves him. And
well, the reason I asked is because I was just curious because you've got Gordon Ramsay, and then you've got a soccer show that you work on.
Right.
I'm just curious. Which one has the higher F-word ratio? Is it Gordon Ramsay, or is it the stuff you get from the soccer?
Is definitely the Welsh. Yeah, they cuss a lot in soccer. There's been a couple times. Oddly enough, in season 3, they let some words go where I was like, oh, we're allowing that word to go through? Okay, you know. But yeah, a lot of cussing in that show. Oddly enough, there is still cussing in MasterChef, but because it's a Fox show, it's all bleeped.
Yeah.
And I forget what the I believe because Wrexham is considered a mature thing, I think they let it all fly. Like I said, the first time I heard a few C words, which over there it's not quite as offensive of a word. It's just a little bit more bandied about. But the first time I heard that, I was like, we're going to turn that into the word cut. And I'm sorry if that sounds weird, but that's just like, yeah, I was just like...
What's the process to do that? Like, how hard is it to actually, like, morph that word
to remove the N? It's not hard at all. Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's just an edit. Yeah.
Pro Tools, just...
Yeah, you just kind of...
I have to bleep Brennan all the time, and I'm the one that does our crap sound mixing, and I'm horrible at it. And so I never do it right. Even when I'm trying to bleep Brennan because he drops, a few bombs here and there, then I'm like,
around a little bit, you know what I mean? Around. Oh, sorry. My bad. Sorry, this is now an MA podcast.
Young man.
I do have a question for you, Mark. So,
hit me.
You said that you adding in a lot of audio for like when they score a goal and all of that. Like, for somebody who's watching that show or anything you do, like how much audio is just added in that's not naturally there?
Good question, because it's tricky. Things like dialogue, for example, that's naturally there, right? So when someone's talking, they're mic'd up, we're getting that audio, we're not having to create anything. That's all just coming from the edit, basically. Just about everything else is added in one way or another. So music, there's a composer that works on the show. He goes through and scores the show. We get that from him, so that's not something we're creating. But pretty much everything else is created by us. So I have a sound design team that when we get the show, they're the first ones to get it. They look at it and they're going to add all of the ambiences, the backgrounds, a car drives by. There may be natural sound that was recorded like from a camera or something like that, but it's usually mono. And it's not, you got to remember the show's in 5.1, so you have 6 speakers that you're working with. You have 5 speakers that surround you, and then you have a subwoofer. And so if all I'm going to work with is mono audio from camera audios or from whatever was recorded in the field, the show is just going to be mono. It's just going to sit in that center speaker.
Yeah.
And we want to just kind of create an environment, right? We want to kind of like use that space and create that sonic immersive experience, right? And so it doesn't mean I won't use it, but I'll maybe blend it with something that's more stereo or bigger than that. Or I might not use it at all. A lot of times, a lot of the crowd stuff that they send us, it's just kind of like, I don't know. It works as a good guide. Like, oh, they cheer here. Okay, great. Now we know where to put a big cheer.
You put in a better sound quality, like an actual thing into there, like the song you're saying.
A song, or all of the game sounds, the cheers and the oohs and the ahs and the that's all we have. Like I said, we have 24 hours of recording from the stadium, so we have all those reactions from the crowd, and they're all kind of scaled. This is like an ooh from like 1 to 10. Oh, this ooh, it's a kind of a 7. We'll throw a 7 ooh in there. Oh, this was a big miss. We'll throw the 10 in there. Oh, so yeah, all those kind of crowd reactions, and they're all just kind of layers. If you've ever seen. I don't know why you guys would see this, but like when you're done with the show, it's just kind of all these layers, edit layers, and they all just kind of stack together and play at the same time. And you have the crowd cheers, and you have the ambiences, and you have all the what they call like individual hard effects, like the soccer kicks and various other sounds. Oddly enough, for soccer, you don't tend to use a lot of that, unless it's kind of the microphone or the camera's up close, or like a lot of times the goalie, when they kick the ball, like they're like really hammering that ball, and so we'll kind of like add a big kick into that kind of thing. But yeah, all that stuff is added.
How deep do you go? Do you get really specific? Like, this is a British car, so we need a British sound, or how deep do you need to go?
It's for that. No. I think, I would say it depends. there's obviously when you're pulling ambiences and stuff, there's just stuff that you're kind of looking for. We're looking for English countryside like ambiences and stuff, or kind of like industrial city kind of stuff, or kind of light city, European city kind of things. You don't want to use like, oh, this is like a, you know, Southeast Asian, you know, morning ambience, because it's like, wait a minute, like what is that sound, you know, like, is that a toucan or like what is that, you know? So there's like things you kind of want to avoid, you know. But for car sounds and stuff like that, no, you do not have to get that specific. It's more just like, you know, most cars kind of sound the same as they drive by, because it's mostly the tire noise that you hear anyway.
True.
So, but especially for the game audio, because like I said, we have a lot of that audio. We do endeavor to make sure that we put as much of the authentic stadium audio in there. And then the other thing that's kind of fun that we do is when they play an away game, we don't use that audio. Now, even though they are technically going to an away stadium, now we're going to give them the kind of like dull, boring library sound effects, like the clap. So in other words, they're like the away team, when they cheer, it's more like, yay, our away team scored. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of lame. And so I call that leaning. I call that like we're leaning away, right? We're kind of like, oh, we're making their crowd sound crappy and boring and whatever. And then when we come home, it's like, you know, full on up, you know, this one goes to 11, you know, crank it.
Favoritism. A lot of favoritism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
I want to admit, I shouldn't admit this, but I took a while to get into the show because I am a Crawley fan.
Yeah.
And Crawley Town played when Wrexham was promoted into League Two.
Right.
The season that Wrexham, the record-breaking season where they ended up with 111 points, spoiler alert, they actually beat the record that was previously held by Crawley Town, I think in 2010, 2011, when they were promoted out of the National League with 105 points.
Right.
So, but also, you know, Notts County also broke it too. So
Yeah.
So I was I am a Crawley Town fan, and I was really disappointed when I started watching your show that it is so dang good. And I did not want to like it because, you know, it feels like I'm cheating on my Reds,
Sure.
the Crawley Town.
Yeah.
And
Now, how did you become a Crawley Town fan, though?
we went. Have you been?
Not this story again.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm going
my
to tell.
gosh.
I love this story.
You can look up the audio from Post. You know what I mean? There's so much of it. I mean, everybody's heard it.
No, Mark hasn't. So
that's true.
I want to talk about it. So in 2016, we went over there, and Brendan, he got over there late because he had more important things to do. So he
Like a
missed the
job.
game. Yeah, he missed the game. But we wanted to go to, because we're soccer fans. I don't have a Premier League team. You know, I felt like that would be like kind of cheating.
Yeah.
I didn't come into it. I wanted to find a team, just like Ryan and Rob. You know, find a team, follow it up the pyramid.
Right.
We went on vacation over there. It was our first time, you know, out of the country, and we ended up finding Crawley Town. They were playing. It was like they might have been like the only smaller league team playing in the area. Everybody else seemed to be playing up north. And we looked at tickets for the Premier League because my youngest son is an Arsenal fan, like Tyler. Brendan is a Man U fan. So you got these front runners.
Right.
And well, I said, well, let's go to this Crawley Town game. I wanted to go and get the whole experience, kind of like with Wrexham. Only Crawley is
Hometown
smaller.
feel kind of thing. Yeah.
Sure.
Crawley
yeah.
is smaller than Wrexham.
Yeah.
You know, Wrexham has their 10,000 seat stadium. Crawley has 5,000 seat stadium.
Yeah.
And so we go, and I said, you know what? Whoever wins this game is going to be my team. Crawley ended up winning 2-0, and they beat Luton Town, who ended up being promoted all the way to the Premier League.
Good team.
So
yeah.
I either guessed wrong or I jinxed it for the Crawley fans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I am 100%. I'm a huge Crawley Town fan,
Nice.
and they did get to go to Wembley as well
Yeah.
last year when
Good.
they were promoted.
And obviously you guys follow the FA Cup, right?
Oh yeah, all of that.
Yeah. I love the FA Cup. I love the idea of it. It's brilliant.
So yeah, so back to Wrexham and the show. I was thinking, as just a fan, we watched the show. My assumption is watching the show is that you go into work, you hang out with Ryan and Rob, and you get the sound, record, and then you're just involved with everything. You're over at the games, you're watching the games, you're getting all the recording, and it doesn't sound like that may be the case. But have you had the opportunity to go over there and in the big picture, how much have you experienced?
Yeah, so I have not been to Wales. I have not been to a game. I have seen, obviously, the team because they played here in Los Angeles. I have never met Rob or Ryan. I think,
Well, I think that's time, so I think we're done here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so, my job in the grand scheme of things, I'm a cog in the machine, and as cogs go, I'm kind of not that important, and I'm kind of more of a smaller kind of cog that kind of happens at the end of the thing, and so there's been times where I thought we might do a review together where I would meet Rob, but it never happened, and my job changed dramatically during the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, I never did I shouldn't say never, but it was very rare for me to do a show and then just kind of send it off over the internet and have somebody else listen to it and give me notes and send it back. Like 98% of the stuff I worked on, we were in the room together, watching the showdown together, making notes, doing fixes, whatever. And once the pandemic happened and we realized that wasn't going to be able to happen, oddly enough, because audio can be just sent down a wire, all of the work went remote, and it actually happened fairly smoothly. I mean, within a week, most of the places, the post houses here in Los Angeles at least, they had a model where they could do not only color but audio remotely. And so all of the producers, they would just put on their headphones from home. And this was also at a time when I think because of all the networks and all the streamers realized that we have now this captive audience. Like anything that was even halfway finished, they were like, finish it, get it on air. And so it was a extremely busy period of time for us. And but because of that, a lot of the shows that I now work on have just remained remote. It just ends up kind of being an easier way to work. If you guys were the producers of a show, let's say I was mixing your podcast, for example, and I was like, okay, guys, I've got the podcast mixed. I'm going to put it up on Frame.io. There's an ability for you guys to write notes. And, Brant, he comes home early and he can get to it, but Tyler had a thing, an event, and he doesn't get in until 9 p.m. And then he watches it, and then Brennan worked all night and he gets in at 2 a.m. and he gets his notes. It allows you guys to kind of like do your things at different times, but still kind of do the same thing. And I wake up in the morning and I see, oh, here's all the notes from everybody, and I go and I do your notes. Hey, this edit sounded funny. The music needs to be louder here, blah, blah, blah. I go and do your notes to your show, and then we're done. And it's off to be put on the air, And so that's the flow that has just kind of continued to work. The guy that I get notes from, the executive producer, I only met him for the first time in person at the Emmy party when we won.
Wow. Did he give you a hug?
So we were walking around. He had his Emmy in his hand, and I had my Emmy in his hand, and we were texting each other like, where are you? And
I'm the guy with
what do you look like?
Yeah, and what do you look like? He's like, I'm wearing a tuxedo. I'm like, everybody's wearing a tuxedo. I'm holding an Emmy. It's like, everybody's all in. Yeah, so, it was, and then we finally bumped into each other, and that was literally the first time we met each other. And we'd been working, we had finished 2 seasons at that point. So it's, so it's an interesting workflow, and probably to my detriment, it's one of these things where, because it's easy, because I don't have to leave home. I don't got to go sit on a freeway. I don't got to, it's just an easy workflow.
Take a shower. You don't have to do any of that.
Hey, dude, I work in my pajamas up until about noon every day.
Do you have Wrexham pajamas? Is that what that is? Wrexham pajamas?
Yeah. No, I do not have Wrexham pajamas. I do have a Wrexham scarf. But yeah, so, you know, and the problem is that by working this way, I kind of don't meet other people. And so I'm kind of siloing myself a little bit. So at some point, that's going to have to stop, and I'm going to have to, like, you know, try
Go outside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, you think you would
You
get
can always
leverage.
call us too. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to
I mean,
talk,
we're
you
here
know,
for you,
express your
Mark, you know.
feelings. You know what I mean?
Got
Share
it.
some audio. We'll listen.
Right.
We're here
you
for
know?
you, yes. You think
Now,
you could...
I do have a question, though. So I just happened to look at the table, and I looked at where Crawley Town was in the table. and then I looked at where Wrexham is in the table. And so I guess I have to ask, do you think Wrexham is going to make it into the Championship League? And do you think
yeah.
Crawley's going to get relegated into League Two?
Oh,
You know,
right.
I have to take this. That's another reason I hadn't jumped on the show, because these two guys mercilessly pummeled me about Crawley, because the season that Wrexham was having, moving into and getting promoted, this was one of the worst seasons. Crawley came like 1 point from being relegated back to the
It was a
National League,
small
and watch,
miracle
you know,
that they stayed up.
passing
Yeah.
Wrexham in the ninth there as one team goes up and one team goes down.
Right.
But yes, they had, unlike, you know, Wrexham, who cheats and has billionaire owners and has all these famous people.
Tough.
We have
Cheats a hard word, man. That's a hard word. Cheats.
we also have American owners who they bought the team that first year where they almost got relegated. They came in and they tried to make Crawley the internet's team and do NFTs and all this thing, and just did it all wrong. If it was you have your experience or Wrexham's experience with owners that want to do it all right and kind of figure out how to blend into the community and do it the right way. Our owners thought, hey, let's do something different. Let's really change it up. And if you know you probably know this now, but you don't do that over there. You don't mess with how things are done in soccer in England. And they learned that the second season, and we ended up making the playoffs and getting promoted. And then we went and lost like 17 players from the team that got promoted.
Oh,
and we have
wow.
an all new team. And then we lost our head coach too. He actually left Crawley and went back down to League Two for Milton Keynes Dons. You know,
Okay,
of all
interesting.
things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Brutal.
Our goal.
Brutal, Brant. Brutal. That's you've given up on them, man. That's so brutal. That's worse
did?
than what happened to Real Salt Lake when their head coach went to go be an assistant coach in another team.
I know. It has
At least
been.
be in the same league.
It was horrible. Amazing
Ready for
miracle
it.
season. Back to let's just try not to get relegated. But
Well,
but
my
yeah,
favorite stat, Brant, Crawley is a minus 13 on the old goal differential, and
Yeah.
Wrexham is plus 12. So only 25 goals separate you. You're right there with them.
Hey,
Yeah,
maybe
so-
when Wrexham gets promoted, they can give up Mullen for you. You know what I mean? Maybe you can buy Mullen. You know what I'm saying? They can start singing about something positive. But hey,
yeah, so it's been rough, but they played well on Saturday. I get up every Saturday morning and watch them play.
Nice.
And
kudos to you.
Do
they
you have to
played
have like
well.
some sort of special cable package for that, or how does
There's
It
that
a
comes
work?
thing-
with a box of tissues. A nice little, what is it called? BetterHelp.com. It gives you like a free thing. It's really great.
Nice.
It goes like side by side.
Right.
It's called iFollow, and it's they use it
Okay.
over there. And
Okay.
I think when I was watching it a couple years ago, I think I was like one of like maybe 13 people watching it from around the world. So
Okay.
doesn't have the massive following, but I am. He doesn't know it, but I am best friends with the guy that calls the games over there, Gary Smith. He does a fantastic job. He doesn't know how close we are. We've actually interviewed him a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I met him when we went over there. We've been over there a couple of times because my daughter, Brennan's older sister, lives in Cheltenham. with their.
Gotcha.
He reminds me all the time. He reminds me how great she is all the time.
No,
Yeah,
just wanted
right.
to give
You know.
Mark context. I mean, we're hopefully, but we go over there and see her. We try and get over there every time we get our credit card paid off, and then we can go back over.
Gotcha.
And
Well,
they've got
well,
2 grandkids for us over there.
nice. I will say the talk, amongst the production side over here is that Wrexham is got a tall order to try to make it into the Championship League. I don't think many people here think that's going to happen, and I don't know. I'm not that deep into it, so that's why I was kind of canvassing here with you guys to see what you thought their chances were.
They're
third
doing really
place
well
right
this year.
now.
They could make it to
22
the
points.
championship. But you know how they
Is it
talked
is
about
it
the first season?
is it 3 teams that get pulled up into the Championship League
Yeah.
from League One? Okay,
Mhm.
okay, because they're in third right now, so they're in that.
Yeah.
Well,
it'll be very tough.
In the first
You
season,
think
where
so?
they talked about
Yeah.
how hard it is to get out of the National League
Yeah,
and back into the EFL and League Two, that really is true. That is incredibly hard for
Yeah.
teams if they get down there because you lose the funding, just like you explained in the show.
right.
But the promotion from League Two to League One is not the same as getting from the National League back into League Two, because 4 teams go up from League Two to League One. But it is a little bigger step from League One to the Championship. And staying in the Championship, that is probably difficult. And then it's probably exponentially harder to get out of the Championship and into the Premier
Into
League
Premier,
and
right?
stay in the Premier League.
I mean, it seems like the amount of money you need to actually afford these players that are Premier level, like you got to be some sort of oil baron, right, to make
Yeah,
that
that's
happen.
how.
Right?
I think that's part of the reason why Wrexham's done so well. It's just
They
they've had
The oil baron.
excess.
They've got the
Remember-
money
Yeah,
to
well,
buy the
if you-
players, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
you compare payrolls, Crawley Town's like between 2 or 3 million, and Wrexham's 8 to 10,
yeah,
right?
Right,
So the
right.
the payrolls are dramatically different.
right, yeah.
So,
Supposed to
but
go
how
different.
has your soccer fandom has it grown? I mean, and is there any backlash? Have you heard any backlash because now Wrexham is it's kind of like the Yankees or
Right,
the
right.
or Man City, which is even worse.
Oh, no, let's not go there, Brant. Let's not be mean about it.
But
Like they're the- yeah.
so, is any backlash?
I have not heard any backlash. And here in the States, yeah, I am not that deep into it. Every now and then I will kind of check during the season, kind of where they're at, but then I kind of forget about it for a month, and I'll check back in, just to kind of. Somehow I'm on. There's some sort of thing on Facebook that I've liked or something, and so I'll see like, oh, they won this game or they lost or whatever. So I'm just sort of like very tangentially aware of what's happening with it, and then this particular year, I decided to do something a little weird, which was when we went to the Emmys, I bought not only me but my editing team. We all got I bought them all scarves. So we all were walking, and by the way, it was 107 out that day in Los Angeles in September. And I was like, "Here's your scarf." And they were like, "Really?
Good present.
Yeah." Luckily, it was air conditioned in the hall that we were in. But so if you see any of the photography from that event, I'm wearing my scarf, and we kind of would walk around, and it ended up being this really kind of great, because the scarf is very Where's Waldo. It's red and white stripe. It's very loud against a tuxedo. And so I ended up just kind of walking around, and I had so many people kind of coming up to me and being like, "We love Wrexham." There was actually a guy from Wales who came up and explained to me how much it all meant, and so
That's
here,
awesome, right?
here,
That's
yeah. Here in LA, I think most people kind of associate it not so much with the soccer team, but just with the show and kind of what the show represents. And so I have not heard anything negative or that like Wrexham is some kind of now the top dog to be beat, kind of thing. And obviously, you know, I'm not sure. I was actually talking to Humphrey at the at the Emmys, and I was like, so what are the odds of like them being promoted? And he was like, oh, it's not good. It's not good. Like even if we just finish in the top 5, like that would be a massive like miracle. And I was like, oh, okay, So so the fact that they're hanging on to the 3rd place spot, I think is pretty amazing. But yeah, so that's yeah, I haven't heard anything negative. So
Well, I have heard that Wrexham is more popular than a lot of other MLS teams, even in their own markets. Not here in Salt Lake. Of course, we wouldn't do that. But other, not so good markets
right.
are kind of turning on their own team. They're more fans of Wrexham than they are of their own local teams. And so, you see that and you're like, well, it's almost fiction here still. It's like, that's not real. It doesn't really exist, but it does. That's the coolest part.
Yeah, yeah. And luckily, it's funny, a few people who hadn't seen the show were like, oh, it's like a scripted show like Ted Lasso, right? And I was like, no, it's like it's the real deal.
It's just natural, yeah.
Yeah, and
Ted Lasso helped though, right? I mean, the popularity of that show.
Yeah,
helped a lot,
oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
The locker room talks are a lot different in Ted Lasso than they are in
Wrexham, sure, yeah, with Phil's enthusiasm.
That thing with that, and then I love that they were starting the counter and stuff like that. I was laughing so hard at that part.
Yeah,
Ding, ding,
yeah,
ding. And there were great sound effects there, Mark. That was my favorite part that you did.
The easiest sound to add, a ding. Yeah. Yeah, that was, and a lot of that stuff these are all Rob and Ryan's ideas, like they are a big part of the show. They're a big part of the zany ideas of the show. During season 1, they had actually, I think, kind of like finished, I think 3 or 4 episodes, and Rob and Ryan were like, it just needs to be weirder, it needs to be funkier, and so they kind of stopped and they kind of pulled them apart and kind of like injected more, just kind of like their own kind of kooky ideas into it, and the kind of the back and forth kind of competition between Rob and Ryan a little bit, so the fact that they've kind of like poured themselves into the show, kind of really, I think, is also kind of one of the things that makes it, kind of fun and interesting. But obviously, it still ultimately kind of comes down to the personalities of the people that live there in that town, and just describing, life and the life of a soccer fan and the ups and downs of it, and the dedication that people have to it, and the importance.
It is different.
In their
it
lives.
is different over there. Have you watched? Did you ever watch a Sunderland Till I Die?
No.
That's another great. It's a documentary.
Yeah.
A little more straightforward, but it talks about Sunderland Club, and they actually had 2 seasons where the first 2 seasons they got relegated 2 seasons in a row.
Wow.
And then I think there's 3 seasons of it. But like your show, it really shows how close these clubs are to the fans.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. And we have it here too in the States, but we have so many clubs. I think we've lost some of that. Major League Soccer does have a benefit because they're only 25 years old, and some of the clubs are still closer to the community than, say, the Dallas Cowboys or something.
Right. Do you guys go to games in Salt Lake City?
Oh, every game, yeah.
Okay,
every
great.
game, pretty much.
Cool.
It's pretty much church. You know what I mean?
Right.
Something you can
Nice.
see
Yeah,
and believe.
we've had season tickets since 2008. Tyler, we were at their inaugural game. Tyler was there as well. So it's pretty ingrained in us. But it is interesting. It's only 20 years old, but it's growing.
Nice.
We should hook you up. We should get you guys doing like an RSL documentary. We could hook you up with Brandon Steinecker, the drummer from Rancid and the Used. We've interviewed him.
What are you
a couple
talking
of
about?
times.
We're going to steal you. We're going to use you for our podcast. Is that all right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, oddly enough, there is a podcast for the Wrexham thing, which I think is called Fearless in Devotion is the name of their podcast. have you reached out to them at all to be like, hey, we should do a joint podcast?
This is why you get paid the big bucks. You know what I mean? Like we're small town folk, and you're a big deal.
Well, have
That's
they
a
won
great
any
idea.
Emmys? We only interview people that win Emmys, you know. So.
That's true. You know?
There's a level for you guys. I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, what's next for you? Because I mean, you probably have another season of Wrexham, most likely. I mean, if you win an Emmy.
There
How
is.
many?
Huh?
How many episodes? How many seasons coming up?
So there's season 4 will start for me in February-ish, and I think it starts airing, I think either like May or June. And so this will be season 4. It'll kind of cover a lot of the season that's happening right now. And then obviously kind of whatever kind of playoff scenario occurs for them, if it occurs for them. And then, yeah, so, that's also MasterChef is happening at that time, and there's a lot of other shows that I work on. I just finished a show on polo. I don't know if you can see in that little corner up there, there's a polo mallet.
Yeah.
There you
Oh,
go.
there you go.
So I just finished a show on the sport of polo. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming up, and every show it's a new thing. We dive into it. We don't know anything about it, and we just sort of dive into it and figure it out and figure out how to make it sound exciting and fun and immersive and try to bring the sport alive and through the speakers.
Polo even? Like, how do you? I don't know how you do that. It's not.
Yeah, so
it doesn't come across as like elitist people that are just like don't want other
it's just
people
for the
around
girls, the horses.
You know what? So this will be a show on Netflix, and they follow a lot of the players. A lot of the players are from Argentina,
Huh.
and honestly, they're the most down to earth people you can imagine. The people who go to play or to go to watch polo, obviously, that's a different crowd.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
chiquitito, sha. Right? They're always talking like that, right?
right. But that was a fun show to work on because that one also like I was like, what does polo sound like, and so I would watch some polo games and there was no sound. It was just like the announcer, because it's the field that they play on is the size of 9 football fields.
Whoa,
So the
I
horses
did
are
not
like
know that.
way over there, and so the guy's just like, and this guy hits the ball, and then this other guy hits the ball, and like that's the only sound is him talking into a microphone. There's no other sounds. And so we were like, okay,
That's rough.
so
Yeah.
we have to like completely reinvent what this show sounds like,
Yeah.
And we did. We made it sound as big and as crazy as possible. So thundering hooves and a lot of every time a horse goes by, it's clunk, 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 big. Try kind of these they weigh a lot, and so we try to really kind of give the gravitas of it. It's also a fairly dangerous sport, so we wanted to kind of also make it seem a little like, just give it a
Edgy.
little edge to it,
Yeah.
So and then the next sport I'm going to work on is something else that I've never touched before, and so I'm going to be like, how do we make this show sound interesting, So yeah, it's and it's a lot of trial and error, and kind of working back and forth between the teams that I work with, especially on the production side, like getting an idea of what they kind of want and don't want, So it's a tricky balance sometimes, So
Awesome.
what I was going to say is does Crowleytown have a podcast for its team?
I thought
It's
about
pretty much
starting
this one.
Is it?
We do.
Yeah, it's pretty much, we do it at the very end,
We
10,
do
15 minutes.
we do the
we do
Come
a little
On Crawley
segment.
update every week.
I
And
think
then,
it's a minute long. Brendan thinks it's 10 minutes long, and Brad knows it's about 8.
But-
And I think it's not long enough.
Because you're the only Crawley fan here, right? It's like,
Yep.
No, I'm a closet Crawley fan. I just give
are
them
you?
crap.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
They did start one. Some of the fans, they started another one called Simply Reds, which is a nice play there on. If you're into '80s bands, you know who I'm talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I've listened to that. They started this year, so there's some fans over there. But Crawley is compared to Wrexham, Crawley is a much smaller club. They were the small. They're probably, if not the smallest, the second or third smallest club in League Two, and they're definitely the smallest club in League One. But hopefully we've got owners that figure it out. And I was gonna say, if you haven't been over there to watch a game, it is really fascinating. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I've been to, I think, 3 or 4 Crawley home games and 3 Crawley away games, which is also an experience. And
Nice.
before you do it, you need to get over there and experience the lower league pyramid football over there.
For
in
sure,
England.
for sure.
It's a lot of fun.
Yep. I'll put it on my list. Put it on my list.
Well, we can't thank you enough for joining us, Mark. We had a great time talking with you.
It's been a
I
pleasure.
found it fascinating. We always enjoy getting to know the people we chat with, and I certainly appreciate what it takes to put these all together more than I did before we started, because I had no idea what it's all about. So,
Well, and I
Yep.
think after spending a little time with us, you can see the struggle that I have in trying to make these two sound good, right? Like,
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Well, can we bug you in the future? I mean, kind of.
Absolutely.
Reach out to you again.
Anytime. I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm a little bit of a one-trick pony. Like, I've kind of told you everything there is to kind of know. It's funny, like, there was, when we were nominated for an Emmy, there was this company, they kind of like run like these kind of like media promotion things for the Emmys. And they were like, oh, do you want to do this little like 15-minute, like interview thing with this guy? And I was like, sure, And so I was like, man, what am I going to talk about? Like like a lot of what I do, it's kind of boring, It's like, I EQ'd this one soundbite, and I kind of like fixed this edit, and then there was the really bumpy part in the music here, and I fixed that. It's like, who cares? That's so boring. And and that's kind of when I latched on to the audio thing, especially after season 2 with having the crowd. I was like, well, that's probably the only thing I can think of to talk about is the fact that like we really did enhance the sound of the crowd, and I felt it made a big difference, And so, like, I just did, and the guy was just like, "Wow, it's amazing," And I was like, "Okay, great," Like, being that I've done this for so long, it's, it's like I'm talking about like ironing a shirt or something like that. It's just like, it's kind of, I don't know what to tell you. It's a little boring, I think also people think like, oh, I'm in show business, and so there's got to be like a lot of glitz and glamour to it, and it's like, no. It's me sitting in front of a computer for 10 hours a day. That's
the part that I
it.
was surprised. My wife was really hoping that you knew Ryan Reynolds. I don't know why she wanted to know
why
that.
was she
but,
so worried about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Why should be,
regale us with your Ryan Reynolds stories. Yeah.
Was his shirt on or off?
Right.
do you know Chris Hemsworth? That would be that'd go really far.
Oh, really? Yeah. Me and Ryan, we're buddies. We're drinking buddies. We go hang out. It's great. I'm actually the one who gives him all his business ideas. Yeah. So.
Do you get free Mint Mobile at least?
I do. Yes. Yeah, I don't have to pay the $15 a month. Yeah.
That comes in the audio mix.
Yeah.
Oh, I had one other question that I was gonna pop in my head, and it popped in, and it popped
I
out.
guess he doesn't. I guess you don't mix the Mint Mobile commercials because those don't always coordinate with the sound and the audio. And
Well, I think they do that on purpose sometimes.
right.
I think.
But do they really? I mean, are they just bad?
Yeah.
Or do
That's what
just
they say.
really
Hey,
gotta-
it's only $15 a month.
Same quality for the commercial.
Right. They gotta cut somewhere.
Right?
So, yeah.
I just remember what I was gonna say. It's like you have a job that no one notices until it's done really poorly.
Yeah. I think the thing that I noticed is that when I had a job that was not this job, like for example, I used to actually work construction back when I was like a teenager, and I was like, God, like I just never want to lift another sheet of drywall again. Like if I can just like live my life in a way where I don't have to move drywall, like I'm gonna be so happy. And
Thanks,
then,
Mark.
Is that what you do? Is that your construction? Oh, I have no idea.
I was
Don't worry, he's the head of the union. Don't worry.
I was a drywall finisher,
I
man.
hate drywall.
And I did some hanging and framing.
Why do they always come in? They come in two. Like if it was just one, you could lift it up. They come in two, right? And it's like this is barely able to pick this up.
Drywall.
It doesn't look like I could do it, but I used to. Yeah, I used to hang quite a bit. But I'm a
Dude,
drywall
I have
finisher by
I have a
trade.
lot of respect for people that
And,
that
I
do
couldn't
that
do it
job.
now. I'm old now, but like
That's a hard job.
I got smart now. I don't know if I got smart, but I'm
That
the
was
rep
perfect
for my
thing
local
to say,
area.
though, Mark. We really appreciate that.
Well, this is great.
Yeah. But yeah,
good.
I honestly, I was like, I want a job where, and also like, then in other jobs, I worked at a stationery store and I had to like stand the entire time, right? And I was like, okay, whatever job I have, I'm going to make sure that like I don't have to stand the
Sounds like
entire.
you just want to sit down. You don't want to do nothing.
You know, like, yeah, take a load off. So, oddly enough, this job, somehow it worked out. You know, like, it knocked off the three things. I don't have to lift drywall. I don't have to stand all day long. It probably has a lot of other, like, detriments that other people... I mean, and trust me, I've worked with people where they're like, dude, I don't know how you do this. Like, you sit there and listen to the same thing over and over and over. I would literally go crazy. My wife, when she hears it, she's like, you've been listening to the same sound for 10 minutes. And I'm like, well, I'm adjusting this EQ, and it's like subtle,
get it right.
little, yeah, it's like, God, is that the right frequency? No, is it this frequency? No, is it that frequency? No, you know. And so I don't even notice that I'm listening to the same sound over and over and over again. She's like, I'm going crazy. Just move on with the, you know. And I'm like,
I think my wife, her dream job is to be like an art restore, you know, with a Q-tip on art, and she could just do that all day long, and I could not do that.
right.
But
right.
hopefully, maybe we'll run into you at like one of these yarn events. Do you ever go with your?
I do. I have, talk about being a fish out of water, man. I have no idea. People walk in and they're like looking at me like I'm going to talk yarn or something. And I'm like,
I have no idea.
yeah, I'm like, I don't know.
Do you knit? And I say, no, but I've threatened to learn.
I've threatened to learn too. I kind of, yeah. I don't know if this happened with you with Alicia, but Christy was like, well, I'm not going to teach you how to knit. She was just like, no, that's like my thing. That's my thing. You have your thing, and I'm do my thing. So I was like,
my favorite yarn story with my wife is she knits a lot. I mean, she's a dyer now. She dyes more than she knits. She doesn't have time. But I asked her one time, she's a very selfish knitter. She'll make stuff for her and stuff. I said, well, when are you going to make me a sweater? I said, I can't. You take too much yarn. So
yeah.
I need to. I guess that's a hint.
I think scale down and ask for a hat, like the little knit cap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a large head too, so
Well, my
we'll
head's
see.
bigger than yours, so I think you'll be all right. Just compare to mine, and you'll be set. Because my wife's a
Yeah.
crocheter. She doesn't knit.
Oh,
She
okay.
crochets, so
Yeah.
it's a totally different category.
It is. Yeah. I think there's a little there's a little hierarchy there, like knitter, crocheter.
I mean, it depends on who you talk to about which one's which, too.
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah, I can imagine.
You can do a lot more with one crochet hook, right? Than I've heard him talk about that. You need 4 knitting needles to make a sleeve or something. I don't know.
Look at
We're
us
getting
talking
way-
about knitting.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say we've lost the plot here. Like
Yeah,
this is
it's
this
getting
has
late.
gone downhill.
It's
Well,
getting,
that's what's coming up next. The Random Yarn Podcast.
Oh, boy.
Oh man.
I'm out.
all
I
right,
just did
guys.
everything that I know, so...
Thank you, Mark. By the way, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you. It's like, you know, most people have no interest in what I do, and so it's been great to just bend your ears.
Don't sell
and...
yourself short like that. Stop
No,
doing that, dude. Like it's honestly really impressive. Like you keep like doing all these subtleties. Like how much time you do to create the art that you do. Like that's really impressive. Like don't sell yourself short.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, we're impressed, so...
All right.
I absolutely enjoyed every. We when we get people on, we try and find out as much about them because it's more. We are a soccer podcast, but we want to learn all about people and have these conversations, which are a lot more fun because soccer, you can do the same thing over and over and over. Oh,
Yeah, that's true. True.
We scored or we didn't score.
Right.
It ended up with a tie.
Yeah, ties.
But
right.
Thank you so much, Mark. We really
Thank you
appreciate
guys.
it.
Appreciate it. Of course, I'll come back anytime. Glad to
Look
talk
forward
to you
to it.
Sweet.
guys. All right.